do is I want to just really kind of quickly simplify what these patents are inevitably protecting here. Because when you strip it all down, you're really looking into two things that are kind of coexisting at the same time. And the first one is blockchain communications. And then the second one is coordination between multi-ledger systems. Now, when we're looking at a system that has multi-ledger systems, that's going to involve multiple banks. They're going to have multiple networks. And those, when you're trying to solve the interoperability between multiple ledgers or multiple banks, those are usually the hardest problems to try to inevitably solve. So when you look at these patents, whether they're in the United States or they're in Europe, I want you guys to understand that we're still looking at the core design of what the patents are really implemented to protect, and it's happening all over the world. It's not just in the United States. It's not just in Europe, but it's inevitably happening all over the world. Now, the main concept of these patents are how do these systems talk to each other, and how do these systems end up agreeing on what's going to happen between one another? So it's not just about sending data back and forth between different institutions or different ledgers, but they're actually agreeing on the sequence of events that are happening within these transactions. And that's huge. That's a huge financial upgrade. Because if you have two systems that don't agree on the order of what happened, then you don't have a working system at all. What you end up having is a mismatch, and you start to introduce risk. And when you create something to the institutions that is risky, the institutions will never rely on it. So what these patents are doing, what I'm going to end up showing you guys tonight, is that they are defining a clear structure where multiple systems can interact with one another, and there is a clear order of how those transactions are being processed. So I want to remind you that this is not happening inside of one single blockchain, but they're doing this across multiple blockchains. And if you are a little technical, then you'll understand the complexity of that, is that we are having this multi-chain future. But if you're not, still, it's easy to understand that you're not solving a problem for just one environment. You're solving a problem for the entire ecosystem. That's essentially what these patents are doing. And when I show you guys these filings, you're going to see the same idea keep popping up time after time after time. But they're doing it in just kind of different jargon, different languages, in just a different manner. So instead of just communicating and ordering with one another, these patents kind of expand into something that's called a secure ledger, a secure multi-distributed ledger system, right? They're kind of coordinating multiple ledgers with one another. That's the technical term, okay? But simply put, it's really just multiple different systems that are operating together in a way that's really secure, it's predictable, it's synchronized, and that's really important for the institutions. So this is kind of where the actions of the ledgers within different systems, whether it's your traditional financial ledgers or your distributed ledger systems, your blockchains, it's where the actions within those ledgers can actually align with one another. And when we start to look at real financial systems, everything has to align, okay? Everything has to be agreed upon. Everything has to settle correctly. You don't get to say that one side of the transaction went through, but the other side didn't even get it. That doesn't work in real financial systems. So when you bundle all of these patents together, like what we're going to do tonight, what you're really going to see is a very clear direction of where things are going. And there is a system that sits between the other systems to make sure that all of these systems can actually communicate, they can coordinate, and they can agree upon the outcomes of what's happening within these ledgers. And they can do all of that without breaking the current infrastructure. So if you can solve a problem to that degree in the real financial system, you become the thing that is allowing these networks to function across multiple environments. If you can somehow solve that, there is no other kind of dependency like that. All right, so we're going to talk about what's actually being protected into these patents. So in the first patent, this is this number here. Don't worry too much about the number or the name. I just want you guys to pay attention to the inventor is Gilbert Verdian. This is a Quant network patent, okay, and this is an active status. And the present disclosure provides a computer-implemented method for maintaining a record of an order of messages appearing on one or more blockchains. Okay, that's what I want you guys to pay attention to, is the one or more blockchains. I mean, I've had anything highlighted. You're going to notice something right away, okay? Regardless of however they decide to put the language together in these patents, you're going to see things like communication of blockchains. You're going to see things like order of transactions between blockchains, right? Order of messaging between blockchains. And you're also going to see like more or one blockchains, or what they would call a multi-ledger system. But that's really the key concepts that they're kind of reoccurring within all of these patents. And if you're not used to reading this kind of stuff, I know it's easy to get lost, and a lot of it sounds complicated, but we need to focus on what it is it actually saying, because you will see these same ideas popping up, okay? It's going to be the communication between multiple ledgers. It's going to be the ordering of the transactions between the ledgers, and it's going to be a multi-ledger coordination, or just multi-ledgers actually working with one another. And there may be different wording for it, but it's all the same concept, okay? The concept is that you have multiple systems interacting with each other, and they are agreeing on exactly what happens between them. So, for example, when you see communication between multiple ledgers, right? When you see communication between multiple ledgers, that's not just sending information between ledgers. That's the systems actually exchanging data between one another in a way where both sides can actually understand it, and they can act on it, and they can trust it. And then usually you'll see something like ordering of messages or sequence of transactions. Very simply, that's kind of just talking about what is being agreed upon when certain transactions happen, and they can know the sequence of the events, right? What is happening first? So if two events, if we have two systems that don't agree on the order of events, then you're going to halt a transaction. The transaction won't even go through. And you won't be able to settle anything on that, because you certainly can't build on top of systems like that. So what these patents are doing is that they are combining a couple of things together. They're combining the communication and the agreement on the order of the transactions. Very simple. Now, when we continue to go, we'll start to see that what they're really saying when they say on one or more blockchains is that they're not limiting themselves to just one system. We all know that it's a multi-chain system. It's not a one chain to rule them all. Okay, and this is built for a world where there's many systems that exist. There's multiple blockchains that are scalable to the institutional needs. You have central banks with their own ledgers. You have commercial banks with their own ledgers. You have governments that have their own ledgers. But there's multiple systems where they kind of have to operate and exchange information between one another. And this is where you can really start to see something that I think is really important, right? Because it's not just talking about one blockchain. I know that there's a lot of tribalism in crypto, and we got to get past that. But these patterns are going to explain how multiple blockchains and multiple systems where they're operating in multiple environments, all of these things are interacting with one another. And when you start to bundle these patents together, instead of looking at them one by one, you start to really see a full picture of what's happening, right? It's a design. This is a complete design for how the systems are going to communicate, how these systems are going to coordinate with one another, and how they're going to agree upon very specific positions inside of these environments. Okay? It's not just one system happening. When we go into this one, right, we have blockchain communications and ordering. This is happening in the European Patent Office. Again, we have Gilbert Verdian and Quant Network. This was applied in 2017, and it's still an active patent. Did I lose my highlights? No. So within this patent, it says the disclosure related to the methods, systems, and computer programs of the SDKs for maintaining a record of an order of transactions appearing on one or more blockchains. Again, there we have it again, okay? So, again, same thing, blockchain communications, right? And ordering. One's in the United States. We have one that's happening in Europe. When we jump into the secure multi-ledger system, we have one happening in Europe. Again, it's the Gilbert-Verdian. It's the Quant network. It's active right now. But then we also have one for a global, worldwide, secure multi-distributed ledger. Again, Gilbert-Verdian, the Quant network. This is to enable the execution of instructions using any more of two or more distributed ledger technologies. So when we put this all together, what are these breadcrumbs inevitably kind of bringing us to, right? These are not isolated ideas. What I'm showing you is the breadcrumbs. And when we start to follow the breadcrumbs, we're not just looking at these patterns individually. We're trying to understand where these patterns are leading us into, okay? What do we actually see here, right? We saw communication, right? Systems that are able to talk to one another. We saw ordering, okay? This is where the systems are agreeing upon the sequence of what actually happened and what is actually going to get finalized. We also saw coordination between blockchains, right? Secure multi-ledger distributed ledger systems, the coordination of multiple ledger systems. And we also have security, right? Secure. We have security. We have to know that we can trust the software upon which these are being built on. Whatever the ledger has proof of the transactions, we have to know that we can trust that. So when you look at these individually, in these patterns individually, it may not seem like it's a big deal, okay? But when you combine these patterns together, what you end up seeing is structure. We're walking into a place where we have structure, okay? This is a structure for how multiple systems are going to function together. Okay, it's not just blockchains, it's not just your traditional ledgers, but it's how multiple systems are actually going to function together, and they're going to do it as if they're all a part of the same environment. Okay, now this is something that we're still running on the old traditional financial system since the 1970s. Okay. This type of infrastructure hasn't been updated in damn near 50 years, okay? Because right now the systems, they don't naturally act like this, okay? The financial systems that we have, they're fragmented, they're separated, they require reconciliation, meaning that different parties have to pay attention to the transactions and they have to manually go in there and they have to manually process it and then communicate with one another to see what they actually have on their ledgers, okay? Now, what these breadcrumbs are going to start to point us into is a world where this friction of the old financial system is going to start to disappear. It's going to start to ease up. Okay, this is going to be a world where these ledgers aren't just sending messages between one another, but they're actually understanding each other. They're not just processing the transactions, but they're agreeing on what had actually happened. Okay. Most importantly, they're not happening side by side. They're actually working together. They're operating together. And when you really think about that, okay, I know that this is maybe like a little too technical for some people who are just like jumping into meme coins and all, but this is a structural shift in how traditional finance is implementing blockchain adoption. Because now we're at the point where we don't have these institutions or these governments or these central banks saying, how can we build better individual systems? They're sitting there, they're wondering, how can we make all of the systems that we currently have work with one another, okay? And can we do it without breaking our current system? And that's a very difficult problem for them to solve, because now you're not just optimizing one environment, you're aligning all different environments that have different rules, they all have different formats, they all have different technologies, they all have different jurisdictions. And what you're doing is you're trying to make them behave all as if they are one system, okay? But here's where this solution gets very interesting, because when you see something like this, something that's being protected in multiple regions all across the world, United States, Europe, you name it, that's going to tell you something very important. Okay, this is not happening at a local level. This is happening on a global scale. This is someone who is looking at the entire financial system, and they're saying, if this system is how things are going to operate in the future, then we have to come out with a standard of how things are actually going to operate. We have to figure out how can we create a structure that these institutions can actually follow. Okay? If that is the case, if that is what these patents are pointing to, then we're no longer just talking about what the technology is going to enable. Now we're talking about standards. Because once something has a way for systems to communicate, the way that these systems are going to coordinate with each other, that becomes required. Standards become required. They're not optional. Okay, required, and that's a big difference between something that's just being used and something that is being dependent upon. So, if this is the world that we're going into, all right, if we're moving into a system where all these fragmented systems need communication between one another, then who is actually building the world for that? That's an important question, right? We're investing in blockchain technology. Well, we know that the patent literally is blockchain communications and ordering. What we invest into is distributed ledger systems, and we know that you probably invest in multiple DLTs. You got XRP, you got HBAR, you got XLM, you got Ethereum, you got multiple DLTs. But they're still operating in their own siloed, fragmented environments. So how can we have a world where Bank of America can use Ethereum? Bank of America could use something like Ripple. Bank of America could use something like Chainlink. How can we work in this environment where you have one entity like Bank of America utilizing and trusting multiple blockchains? Because that's the world that we're moving into. And if we're paying attention to what these patents are inevitably leading us into, we're not just talking about what could happen. I'm not making a prediction here. This isn't what I'm doing. I'm not making a prediction, but we're looking at what someone is actually trying to do right now. Now, within these patents, okay, the inventor is Gilbert Verdian. Okay, he's the founder and the CEO of Quant Network. QNT is the token. All right, and what he's focused on is a world where he is trying to upgrade upgrade the way in which the infrastructure interoperability. He basically wants to make blockchains and Web3 communicate the same way that you're able to go on the web on the internet and type in www dot and then punch in any website that you want. So the way that www connects to the internet, he wants to connect blockchains via Quant's network. All right. Now, Quant, in and of itself, is trying to figure out how to get multiple systems to work together. Multiple systems to work together. Quant is not the blockchain. All right. Now, if we're referring back to these patents, what we inevitably saw between all of them is a similarity between communication, the ordering, the coordination, and the safety. And that's the exact layers that Quant is kind of coming in to kind of implement, right? Quant is sitting between all of these systems. It's kind of positioning itself as the layer that's going to enable all of the other systems to interact and communicate and be able to exchange information. The coordination. And the only way that a project like QNT ends up winning is if it becomes required. That's it. It's the only way that a token like that is going to give anybody financial freedom. It is if the ecosystem becomes required. Because if we know that the future is going to involve multiple systems existing with one another, then whatever is going to enable that interaction between multiple systems it's going to become very important. But it has to become required. It has to become a part of the system. If it sits outside of the system, then it's going to be a terrible investment. That's just my perspective. So let's get into how the QNT token is actually functioning within these patents, right? Because we're kind of here to make money. And I'm not going to lie to you guys. I'm definitely not going to lie to myself. When we talked about the patents, the communication, the ordering, the coordination, the infrastructure, I think that those are very important for the Quant ecosystem. But none of that is actually going to automatically benefit the price of the token. Okay. And maybe that's where a lot of people end up getting things kind of wrong, is they assume if the system grows, the ecosystem grows, then the token has to go up. And sometimes that's true, but sometimes it's always not true either. It depends really on the ecosystem that you're referring to. So Quant at its core is providing access to the system. All right, it's software as a service. It's not replacing money. It's not the asset that's actually being transferred or sent between each other, and it's certainly not moving value between the banks. But all that it does is provide access between the banks, right? It provides access into the software. So if you're an enterprise or a developer or an institution and you want to use the Quant ecosystem, if you want to use the system that's going to connect multiple ledgers together, then you need access to get that software, right? It's like imagine it like if Google was no longer free and you had to sign up with Google with a Google account, and let's say that you had to pay a subscription for Google. Well, once you paid the subscription for Google, then you would have access to Google.com and you could do whatever you would like on it. It's like that subscription-based model is the key to the gate. All right. So QNT is kind of where the token will come in when you need access to the system. It's the key to the gate. Is QNT going to act like a stock and pay dividends? That's a good question. So QNT is they're coming out with quant staking, okay? But this is not your traditional staking. So there's really two things in there. You're saying, is it going to act like a stock and pay dividends? You will be able to earn a yield on the QNT, but it's not going to be like a stock because it's not a security. It's participation in the network, which would make it more like a commodity. Right, so you would be staking your QNTs to secure and validate transactions on the Quant's ecosystem. So it's not like you're like expecting a return from the QNT network or the company. That's what's going to separate it from being a stock. But if you are going to stake your QNT, it's as a means to secure and validate the Quant ecosystem, which is participation in the network. It's the actual utilization of the network. So you will be able to earn a yield on it. I mean, who knows what it could be? I don't know. It could be 5%. It could be 8%. It could be more. I mean, the thing's got 14.8 million tokens. That's all it's got. So I would imagine that if demand, increases and there's a lot of stress on the validators and they want to incentivize more people to stake their quant to secure the network, then they're going to offer a better yield. But only 14.8 million, it would have to be a fortune. Are you talking in terms of like the yield of the staking, or are you talking about the price of the token? Which one are you referring to? The token. Yeah, so I'm kind of going into how the token is going to obtain value. Like we know that Quant is 3 confirmed central banks. You got the Bank of England, you have the European Central Bank, and who is the third one? The Bank of International Settlements. Those are 3 confirmed partnerships or integrations with central banks. They move all the money in the world. You know what I mean? Add on top of that the news with Murex, with Quant's integration with Murex. They're moving about 25% of the global FX trading. Okay, and then here comes Quant allowing Murex to allow their customers to start to interact with tokenized deposits into the capital market infrastructure. So this is another big integration. The Murex client gained access to tokenized deposits and bond issuance capabilities that's built on QuantFlow and Overledger. If it's built on QuantFlow and Overledger, then the QNT token is required for that. Now, 25% of FX, right? What is that? What did it say? 25% of global FX trading. I don't know, like what that number is, what that number looks like. Regardless, whatever the number is, that's not something that's going to impact the price. So they're saying $9.5 trillion per day is 25%. No, I'm sorry. 25% of the daily FX is 2.4 trillion dollars every single day. So they're moving about $2.4 trillion every single day. Murex is just 25% of the global FX. Now that doesn't mean that 2.5 trillion or any trillions of dollars is flowing into the QNT token. That just means that since Murex is kind of enabling their clients to have access for Quant Flow and Overledger, these are two software models that revolve around the QNT token. So if these clients want to use Quant Flow or they want to use the Overledger, which of course they do, we just talked about the friction points that it solves. Maybe they don't. I don't know. But if they do, they want to hold on to the QNT token in order to gain access, right? In order for them to gain access. Just need the clarity. Oh, yeah, we were talking about how much money can actually flow through the system. The 25% of the global FX is $2.4 trillion every single day. That doesn't mean that $2.4 trillion is flowing into the QNT token, because QNT is not a value capture token, all right? It doesn't matter how much capital is moving on the ecosystem. That's not what's affecting the price of QNT, all right? It's about how many participants need access to the system. How many people need access to their systems? That's what it is. So they have 60,000 worldwide users, 65 out of top 100 banks. That's the number that we need to address. So let's say 20 of those users want to use PayScript and Overledger, right? 20. Let's say half of that, 30 banks of them. They need to pay a subscription-based model fee in order for them to gain access to that. It's how many participants need access to use Quant's infrastructure. That's how the token actually obtains its value, okay? And if these patents end up becoming foundational, where the hell am I? If these patents end up becoming foundational, then what we're really looking at is how far does the arm stretch out? To how many institutions, to how many central banks, to how many commercial banks? How many of them are going to need to become participants in order to access this software as a service? If ISO TC 307 really kind of is the foundation, and these patents are kind of establishing the standardization of what we need to enable, then potentially maybe it's the entire system becomes participants to the software. Maybe it's everybody. Maybe. So it's a different model, right? We're not relying on transaction volume for a project like this. What we're relying on is adoption of the infrastructure. That's how the QNT token is going to obtain its price. Now, I'm not saying that every transaction is it doesn't increase the demand of the token, because you still have your speculative, your retail buying and holding, your staking, your securing of the network. But the token is tied to the access to the system. So if more systems, more institutions, more developers need access to this layer of the financial system, does that increase demand for the QNT token? Of course it does. Of course it does. If that system becomes more relevant, right? It becomes more implemented, more adoption. If it does become the standard, then what we're doing is we're paying attention to the difference of infrastructure growth versus something that's going to capture the value, like your XRPs or your XLMs. Those are your value capture tokens, okay? But if Quant is successful with the way that it is positioning itself to become the standard, then the participants are going to need access to get into that layer or into that software, and that's going to create a cascading chain of events, right? If they need access, then they need the token. Okay, so when we start to pay attention to all of the patents between communications, between the ordering, between the coordination of multi-ledger systems, between the security, right? between how Quant is positioning itself to become the standard, and then how the token actually operates within these ecosystems. When you view everything that we kind of talked about tonight, and you really zoom out, we're going a little bit beyond the surface level information, right? We're not competing in the same way that you have these other blockchains that are competing, right? We're paying attention to Canton. We're paying attention to Ethereum. We're paying attention to XRP, right? When you're paying attention to these ecosystems, we're looking at how many users are utilizing this blockchain. How many developers do these blockchains have? What blockchain has more liquidity? And then a lot of them, if they're speculative tokens, they're competing for like social media engagement and attention. That's what they're competing for. Users, developers, liquidity, and attention. But that's not what Quant is competing for. It's not. Quant is competing for the standard, the standards, okay? They are literally competing to define how the systems are going to communicate with one another, okay? How the systems are going to coordinate with one another, how the systems are going to agree with one another. How are the systems even going to settle if they can't interact with one another? That's what they are competing to define, because once they can define how the blockchain and traditional finance are going to work together, then everything is going to be built on top of that standard, right? Everyone has to follow those rules. The standards aren't suggestions. That's the structure of how the system is actually going to be adopted and be integrated in. So when you're looking at patterns like this, right, you have them in the United States. You have them in Europe. Again, secure multi-ledger distributed ledger systems in Europe. And then you have them worldwide. When you're looking at systems like this, these are global filings. It's happening all over the world, right? This is the positioning. We're not just looking at the technology. We're looking at someone trying to define the foundation of how blockchain and traditional finance is going to interact with one another. That's a breakthrough. That's an absolute breakthrough. Someone is coming in, they're looking at the friction points of how we currently have these systems set up, and they're saying if these systems are going to interact, if we know blockchains need to speak to blockchains, and traditional finance has to speak to traditional finance, and blockchains have to speak to traditional finance. If we know that these systems are going to have to interact with one another, and it is a multi-chain future, and it's still going to connect into your Wall Streets and your DTCCs and your clearing houses and your central banks, if they're going to connect into your traditional financial system, then we are going to tell you how you're going to do it. This is how it's going to be done. You're telling Wall Street, this is how you're going to do it. And we defined it. We told you how to do it. We built the standards. And then we built the technology around the standards. That's the silent war of standardization. When I keep saying it's a silent war of standardization, most people miss it. Because they're not looking at where it's happening. We're looking at the documents, we're looking at the frameworks, we're looking at the infrastructure, we're looking at the design of the financial system that's coming in. Where are they looking? They're looking in the narratives, they're looking in the headlines, the X, they're looking at the funny, stupid videos. You're not finding this stuff from CNN. You're not. But most people ignore it. You know, don't get me wrong. I know I'm talking about really boring stuff tonight, but these are the breadcrumbs of what is being implemented. Don't you see it? Don't you see it? This is global. This is global. This is a global unlock. They are working together. This is a system that is already being in place. It's already being used, right? Once it is really secure for the actual scalability of the global financial system onboarding, the price has already been locked in, and most people it'll be too late before they even recognize it, you know. So look, don't get me wrong. We're not trying to predict the future here. We're just recognizing the patterns. That's all we're doing. We're recognizing the patterns. We're recognizing the positioning over and over. Quant Network. And it's not just for Quant's network. It's for all of blockchain. It's for all of the blockchains, all of the multi-ledger, distributed ledger technologies. Has